Hi, welcome to episode number 3 of this history walking tour from Aquatic Park to Nob Hill. Today we're beginning in Aquatic Park, but we're immediately going to walk up to Russian Hill. In episode number 1 and 2, we did the history here in Aquatic Park, so if you haven't seen those, you should go back and watch them, and then we'll start up the hill. So I'm going to start walking up that way now. I'm starting in the same spot I've been in all of these walking tour episodes. I'm going to walk over to Larkin Street and up Larkin Street 2 blocks. I'll cross North Point Street and we'll stop for a couple of minutes at Bay Street. This episode is largely going to be us moving from Aquatic Park to the top of Russian Hill. There aren't as many big things to see, and there's a lot of walking. We're going to do our first stop at the corner of Bay and Larkin and look at some old photos, and we're going to do that quite a few times along the way. I'm also going to cut out a lot of the walk just because there isn't much to see on a lot of this. As we get to the corner, you can see the park that they are building across the street. It was going to be called Russian Hill Park, but now its new name is Francisco Park. Here's what it looked like on this corner in 1915. Now we'll cross the street and go up the stairs. This lot has been the site of a reservoir since 1859. I mentioned this reservoir in episode number 1 and 2. It was supplied with water from Lobos Creek over near Baker Beach, and the water went through a redwood flume all the way to Aquatic Park, where it was then pumped up here. It was San Francisco's first reservoir, and this reservoir was in service until 1940. Since 1940, the city and developers have tried to build here, but local residents have been able to stop it. At this point, let's stop and look at the stairs and retaining wall that were built in 1915 to hold up the hill and to let people get up to Francisco Street. Now we're going to make our way up the last short flight of stairs, and we'll get a good view of where the reservoir used to be and the new park construction. At the top here, we're going to rejoin Larkin Street, and it will be Francisco Street coming in from the right. Hi, here I am at the top of the stairs. I'm overlooking what used to be Russian Hill Reservoir. They're now turning it into a park, and I'll show that to you. People have been trying to get this park built for years, and it wasn't until 2020 that they started. The last time I was up here about a year ago, you could still see the remnants of the reservoir that was up here until 1940. This is what it looked like from here a year ago. This is what the reservoir looked like early in 1904. Later in 1904, they put a roof of wood on the reservoir to cover it, and this is what it looked like. Okay, now we're going to continue up the hill, but first let's look at the work that was done to create this road going up this steep hill in 1916. If you notice a storm drain in the bottom right-hand corner of this photo, you'll be able to see the same storm drain in this photo of 1916 when they were grading and building this road. Now I'm going to walk up the 2 blocks of Larkin Street from where I'm standing to George Sterling Park. This small section of Larkin Street here is one of the few streets in San Francisco that is still paved with the original 1916 brick. In a minute, we're going to be at the corner of Larkin and Chestnut Street, where you can get a really good view of the work they did in 1916 to create this road. This is when it was done in 1916, and here is what it looks like now from the same spot. Now we have 1 block left to go to get to George Sterling Park. This park takes up 1 full city block and also doubles as a reservoir. George Sterling was a poet and a playwright and became a famous public figure in San Francisco starting in about 1895. He never really left Northern California, and he never became as famous in other parts of the United States as he was here. He was part of what was called the Bohemianism movement in Northern California, where artists lived and worked together. He was friends with Jack London and Upton Sinclair and Sinclair Lewis. Although George Sterling is largely forgotten today, one of the things he is most remembered for is how he died. Apparently, he always carried a vial of cyanide with him. And when asked about it, he said, quote, "A prison becomes a home if you have the key." He eventually used this vial to commit suicide in November of 1926. This piece of land has been dedicated to George Sterling since 1928. On the left, we have arrived at the Alice Marble tennis courts, which take up most of George Sterling Park. These tennis courts are on top of Lombard Reservoir, which was finished in 1940 and replaced the reservoir we saw farther down the hill. This is a reservoir in the early 1940s, before they covered it and put the tennis courts on top of it. I'm now going to walk down to Hyde Street and then back a block to Lombard. The tennis courts we were just looking at were named after Alice Marble. She was the #1 female tennis player in 1939 and a San Francisco resident. She won tennis championships from 1936 to 1940. She continued to have an interesting life after she retired from tennis. For a while, she worked for DC Comics as an editor for the Wonder Woman comics. In her second autobiography, she also claimed to have been a spy for the U.S. government at the end of World War II. She said that her mission was to collect Nazi financial data from a Swiss banker, and that she was shot in the back while trying to escape. She was also one of the loudest voices calling for the desegregation of the sport of tennis in the United States. Okay, I've made it to the top of the famous part of Lombard Street. I'm at the corner of Hyde and Lombard. This is what the street looks like today. Many of the streets in San Francisco that were on hills and really steep, the city decided to just leave the way they were and to either block off or put stairs on. Lombard was just left alone until 1922, when they finally decided that they were going to try to make it so you could get up and down it. The winding or switchback design is the design they chose, and the only one that would work with how steep the hill was. You can really see how steep the hill was in 1922 before they started. And here is what the construction looked like during 1922. Here's one last shot of Lombard today. I'm going to end episode number 3 of this walking tour here at the corner of Hyde and Lombard at the top of Lombard Street. I know this episode's been a little bit shorter than the last 2, but I think this is a good place to stop before we move on to stuff farther up Russian Hill. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you next time for episode number 4.